Well, welcome to day 9 of Bible Made Easy for Kids reading. It is day 8 of Lent, and we are going to be starting on page 77, the meaning of words. Altar. Exodus 20:24, a place on which people lay their sacrifice to the Lord. An altar was usually made with large stones. A wood fire was made on top of the altar to burn the sacrifice. Sometimes an altar was also used to mark the spot where a special event had taken place. It was like a monument to remind the people of the great thing God had done there. Consecrate. Consecrate. Exodus 30:29-49. To set aside something for a special purpose and not to use it for any other purpose. If we keep away from sin and live in a life that is pleasing to God, we are setting ourselves apart from Him to use us as He wants. See 2 Timothy 2:20-21. Whenever we do a special task for God, we should consecrate ourselves to Him and make sure we serve Him with a pure heart. Covenant. Exodus 19:5. A serious promise or agreement between two people. A covenant can also be made between two groups of people or two nations. God also made certain covenants with His people by which He promised to bless and protect them if they followed His ways. The meaning of words. Priest. Exodus 29:44. Someone specifically chosen for this task, who would stand between the people and God. Priests would perform certain duties in the tabernacle or temple and make sacrifices for the sins of the people. Although the priest was not perfect himself, he was to live a very godly life. Jesus came to earth to be the only perfect priest, knowing what it is like to be human while also being completely holy and able to stand before God. See Hebrews 4:13-15. Sabbath, Exodus 28. When God had finished creating the whole universe, He rested on the seventh day. Not that He was tired, but rather that He wanted to enjoy what He had made. One of the commandments God gave us is that we too should rest on the seventh day, our day of rest. This day is called the Sabbath. Since Jesus rose from the dead a Sunday, the day He came back to life, He has become the special day for most Christians to worship and enjoy their Creator. Sanctuary. Exodus 25:8. A very special place like a tent or a building where God meets with His people. A temple and a church building are examples of a sanctuary. To God, people are far more important than the place where they meet. In fact, because God's Spirit lives in us, every believer is now important. Part of God's temple is now an important part of God's temple. See 1 Corinthians 6:19, Ephesians 2:21-22. God comes down. The important day had finally come. It was the first day of the first month, the beginning of their second year. Everything in the tabernacle was in place and all the people had prepared themselves. Now they were waiting, holding their breath. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Not even Moses could enter the tent because the cloud of God's awesome presence settled all around it. From that day on, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, the Israelites would pack up and get ready to follow the cloud wherever it led them. And as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, the Israelites who were camping around it did not move. The tabernacle was like a symbol or picture to help people understand what Jesus was going to do when He came to earth. While there was a tabernacle and later a temple, people could not go into the most holy place. See Hebrews 9:8. But when Jesus came as the great high priest and died for us as the perfect sacrifice. He opened a way for us to go right into the most holy place and draw near to God with clean, sinless hearts. See Hebrews 10:19 through 22. Who was the only person allowed in the most holy place and when? See Leviticus 16:2 and 34. If you give me 1 second, I'll find the verse. Leviticus 16:2 says, the Lord said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron not to come whenever he chooses into the most holy place, behind the curtain in front of the atonement, thank you, cover on the ark, or else he will die, because I appear in the cloud over the atonement cover." And then when you go to Leviticus 16:34, it says, "This is to be a lasting ordinance for you. Atonement is to be made once a year for all the sins of the Israelites." And it was done. And the Lord commanded Moses. Aaron was the only person allowed in the most holy place once a year. On to Canaan, or maybe not. One day, while the Israelites were still camping in the Sinai desert, or Sinai desert, the cloud that had been resting over the tabernacle lifted. This was a sign to the Israelites that they should get ready to move with the cloud. They traveled from place to place with the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant in the front. They followed the cloud until it came to a rest in the desert of Paran. However, when they got to Kadesh, the nation of Israel sinned against God because of their unbelief. And because they rebelled against God, they spent 38 more years in the desert before finally crossed over into the promised land. Numbers 33 gives the details of their long, drawn-out journey. On the next page, find out what happened at Kadesh. Spying out the land. When the Israelites were camping at Kadesh, the Lord said to Moses, "Send more men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites." So Moses sent out 12 men, one leader from each of the 12 tribes. He told them to find out what the land is like, whether the people are strong or weak, and whether the soil there is good with lots of trees all over. He also told them to bring back some of the fruit from the land, if they could. The spies set out to make their way to Hebron, deep inside enemy territory. In one of the valleys where they came across vines that bore huge bunches of grapes. They cut a bunch that was so heavy it took 2 men to carry it on a pole between them. After 40 days, when the spies got back to the Israelite camp, there was great excitement among the people. Everyone wanted to know what the promised land was like. Then the spies reported to Moses and the people what they had seen. "The land of Canaan is very fruitful," they said, "but the people who live there are powerful, and their cities have high walls around them." When the people heard what they were up against, they became afraid and discouraged. Have the Israelites gotten lost? The news about the promised land was not what the people had expected to hear. The people there were really, really big. However, Caleb tried to encourage them by saying, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But of the 12 spies who had gone to Canaan, 10 of them said, "We can't attack those people. They are much too strong for us." We are like little grasshoppers next to those giants." Then the 10 spies went and spread scary rumors among the people about the land of Canaan. That night all the people cried and moaned. They complained to Moses, saying, "It would have been better for us to die in Egypt or here in the desert. Why did the Lord bring us out of Egypt?" The Israelites talked about choosing another leader to take them back to Egypt. They even planned to kill Moses and Aaron. But the glory of the Lord came down on the tabernacle where Moses was, and they could not go near him. Excuse me. Sorry. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people, because of your constant complaining, not one of you over the age of 20 will enter the promised land. You will die here in the desert. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, I will lead your children into the land I promised them. Only Caleb and Joshua, who have been loyal to me, will enter the land." See Numbers 14:30 through 31. So they stayed at Kadesh or Kadesh for a long time until the Lord led them back toward the Red Sea. See Deuteronomy 146:2-1. Sorry. Got my mouth jumbled. See the map on page 80. On track at last. After the Israelites had spent many years in the desert, the Lord finally said to Moses, "The people have wandered around long enough now. Turn north and head towards Moab, but do not fight against the people there." So when the Israelites reached the Zered Valley, they traveled east around the land of Moab. See Judges 11:18. The Lord spoke to Moses about the new land and gave him the exact borderlines of their country. See Numbers 34. He also gave the Israelites strict instructions to drive out all the people living there and totally destroy their idols. Then the Lord said, "If you do not force out all the people living there, they will become like splinters in your eyes and thorns in your sides." Numbers 33:55. On the left is a map showing the heathen, godless nations living there at the time. Back in Exodus 3:8, when God spoke to Moses from the burning bush, he had told him about all these nations and that he would give the Israelites to this land. That time had come. Hittites, Hivites, Canaanites, Perizzites. That was supposed to be Hivites, sorry. No, wait. Bless you. Gerasenes, Hivites, Canaanites, Jebusites, Amorites, Hittites, Philistines. New leader. It was time for someone to take over from Moses, someone who would lead God's people into the land he promised them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua, who has the Spirit in him, and lay your hands on him." Joshua had been Moses' helper for many years. Moses gathered the people and told them that God had chosen Joshua to be their new leader. The Lord also told Moses to go up on a mountain to see the land he was giving them. However, Moses himself would not be allowed to enter the land because he didn't fully trust God and honor him before the people when he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. At last, Moses saw the promised land. After that, he died at the age of 120, and the Lord buried him in Moab, but no one knows where. See Deuteronomy 34. Where did the people who lived in Canaan come from? Noah's son Ham had 3 sons. One was called Canaan. His descendants lived in the land of Canaan. See Genesis 10:15 through 18. Sorry. Why did the Lord tell the Israelites to drive out the Canaanites from their land? They worshipped idols instead of God. Canaan was the father of the Hittites, that's how you say it, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, and others. Some of the idols and gods in Canaan: Baal, Asherah, Dagon, and Molech. Thank you for joining me in my part of the Bible Made Easy for Kids reading. I would like to close out with a quick prayer of my half, and I will then give it to my sister. Thank you, God, for leading us out of the terrible Egypt and all the terrible slavery that we had. Thank you for giving us all our hardships today, and let us grow as people today, and let us grow in patience, love, and kindness. Amen. I will now give it to Rain, my sister, for her Bible verse.
I hope you guys enjoyed my brother's reading. Today's verse was, "The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His miracles never..."
Mercies. His mercies.
His mercies never
cease.
Mm-hmm.
Lamentations.
3:22. I did one other page since I had enough time. This page, it said, "Give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you." 1 Peter 5:7.
Very good.
I hope you guys have a good day. Goodbye.